You know, my feeling is, just from looking here, is that what I'm going to find when I start trying to take things loose is a lot of rusted out, or quite rusty brake lines and such. Well, I decided to go ahead and twist on some brake lines to see if they break. I guess that's as good a way to explain it as any. I've got the brake fluid draining out. On this car there's a cup up behind the spare tire inside the trunk where the brake fluid reservoir is, and it runs down through that pipe into the top of the master cylinder. That's the master cylinder right there, that rusty thing you see. And see those lines, those metal lines that run to it? Those are the brake lines for both sides in the front, and I'm guessing that the one that goes back and disappears will run to the back of the car, where it will probably tie into some kind of a T-block and then go out to each wheel. Alright, this is worth documenting. I've just had something happen that I don't think I've ever had happen before. All three of these came loose with very little effort. And all three of them seem to be turning in both places that they need to. And what I mean by that is this nut needs to turn where it connects to the master cylinder, but it also needs to turn around the brake line, otherwise it will bend the brake line. And I'm going to try to show what I mean by that. I'm going to put this wrench on there, if I can. And when I turn this, you see the whole brake line? Well, actually it's turning. Okay, so you don't see the whole brake line moving. See, what often happens is these things become rusted together right here where my finger is. And then when you turn that, it twists the line until it breaks it. In this case, I'm loosening that, and it's not twisting the line, and it is coming loose from the brake cylinder. And this is on a car that's been, well, how old is this thing? 64? That's a good sign. I don't see why, if that's working that way and it keeps working that way, I don't see why I can't just get that thing loose and get it right out of there. And then, heck, that gives me a good place to start from anyway. All three brake lines are loose from the master cylinder. Next thing to do is to take the master cylinder out. I'll explain a little bit about how brakes work. The reason they call that the master cylinder is that's where everything starts at. That master cylinder is a pump. It pumps brake fluid to the rest of the car. If the master cylinder doesn't pump any fluid, then nothing's going to happen, which is pretty much what we've got happening right now. Nothing. One of the reasons I suspect the master cylinder rather than suspecting a leak or something somewhere else is because on a car where the master cylinder works and it has a leak somewhere, the pedal works, it goes up and down, you just don't have any pedal. On this one it doesn't even do that. The pedal goes to the floor and stays there, it just sticks. Which kind of tells me that the master cylinder is probably full of crud, and the cylinder won't even move smoothly. The plunger won't even move smoothly inside the cylinder. On this car, they've designed it in a way that I think is pretty neat. You notice that that cylinder is outside where it can get wet and rusty, but the bolts that hold it in, they're inside the car, right there. See them? Nice and clean and shiny-o. Oh, you notice, if you can see it down there, the rubber around that cylinder is all dilapidated, corroded, cracked. That's probably a pretty good sign that inside is going to be the same way. This thing is full of rubber cylinders, rubber grommets, rubber washers, whatever you want to call them, that work inside a cylinder, and if they're rotted out, then it isn't going to have any pressure, it isn't going to pump any fluid. So what I'll do is, that looks like about a, I don't know, about a 12, 13, I'll get me a wrench to fit that, get me a socket put on that, pop that thing loose, and we'll see if we can't just slide that right out of the car. Once I have it out in my hand, I can kind of inspect it and make it a lot easier to figure out what to do. you know, what comes next. I'm thinking what's going to come next is the new master cylinder. But let me pop that baby out and we'll have a look at it. Alrighty, here we go. We have the master cylinder in my hand. And as I was explaining, all this thing is a pump. There's a plunger that goes down through this cylinder and pushes fluid out through the brake lines, and it goes to the brakes and pushes another cylinder, which, ooh, look at that, it's working. Dirty, but it's working. Okay. This might be rebuildable. That's very interesting. Think about it, you can take one of these apart, see how, like I was talking about before, see how this rubber is all corroded? Yeah, chances are it is inside there too, but that's a good place to start. The idea that that's working that much is telling me that, because even if it was working that much, that pedal should have been working, because you can see it's springing back. So what probably is happening is, I have been told, like I say, that those brake lines are bad about stopping up, so they may be stopped up. I might see if I can get me a kit and rebuild this baby. We used to rebuild them back in the old days pretty commonly, and I'll take it apart and see what it looks like. You might decide to go that way. Of course, they're so dang cheap. You can buy them off online for about 10 or 12 bucks. Ain't very much. So I suppose it'd make more sense to buy a new one than it would to rebuild that one. Even if that one was good, I might as well buy a new one while I got it off. You know what I mean? Okay. I'm gonna go get cleaned up and consider what I've done and maybe stack some wood.